Started. Great. And just as a little housekeeping thing, I know that some of us are newer to online courses. When we do have the breakout rooms for the small group discussions, those of you who are comfortable facilitating or used to facilitating, if you'll help to get the discussion going. I know sometimes you're thrown into a group with some people and not quite sure who's going to start, but if one of you can take the lead and just kind of help the group engage with some of the questions that we have for the small groups, that would be really helpful. Are there any other housekeeping issues that you have questions or any problems that you've had that we need to address? Okay, hearing none, we will go ahead and light our chalice. I'm going to light mine here. And I believe you have a reading from beloved May Sarton. Help us to be the always hopeful gardeners of the Spirit, to know that without darkness, nothing comes to birth, as without light, nothing flowers.
Right.
And just to start, I'd like to invite you all to share something in the chat box that you do which identifies you as a Unitarian Universalist or as a person of faith. Something that you do in your everyday life or from time to time. And try to think of something other than attending a worship service or RE or doing this module or other types of professional development. Something that that you do as kind of a way to identify as a person of faith. If you'll share that in the chat box, I'll read them as they come up. So, a daily lighting of incense and reciting affirmations for the day. Doing volunteer work. Being involved in a local interfaith social justice organization. Walk and explore the world with my daughter. Taking time to enjoy a moment, to be thankful, whether it's in line for groceries or on top of a mountain. Speaking to someone every day about my faith and have a map on the phone of all local churches to direct them to their nearest congregation.
Oh, that's great.
Posting hymns or readings on Facebook to share a spiritual but not Christian moment with others. I'll share one of mine. I go down to our Florida State Capitol building, which is just a few minutes away from my house, to rally for social justice issues that are important to me. Okay. Thank you all for sharing. Do we want to have Pat, I didn't know where you wanted to fit in the river journey sharing. Do we want to have Jules share hers?
Jules, I did not hear from Jules or Andrea. I did hear from Rayla, who won't be with us today. Unfortunately, Rayla had a death in her family. Her 101-year-old uncle passed away, and there's a very large family gathering that she needed to be at.
I sent you an email. I'm more than happy to share today.
Okay, that'd be wonderful. I'm sorry, I'm not sure why I didn't get your email. I'll go back and check that. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
That'd be great, Jules. Just 5 minutes or less, if you would just. And for those of you, we had a mishap where one person didn't get in a group, and another group we didn't have time for everyone to share. So we invited those 3 people to just share their river journeys as part of our opening.
So I rethought my river journey after our discussions, and then one of the questions that Pat suggested was like how my journey was influenced by people, and I think there was a balance of people and events that were really has driven it. Early on, I was adopted, which was a huge question of identity. And so that part of the journey was a little bit challenging and a lot of questions unanswered. I also felt that I think I was in kindergarten when I held my first protest, which was not exactly a positive thing within my family, when a friend of mine couldn't go to the same school I was going to because she was in a wheelchair. So I always felt a little bit different. I think that I was very involved in kind of a mega church in the Chicago area called Willow Creek, and I was a youth staff there with my best friend. And I think 2 ministers there influenced me when they asked my best friend to step down because he came out as being gay. And my conversations with them led to quite a bit of disillusionment and not understanding. My definition of Jesus was very different from what I found the church's definition of Jesus was. But that disillusionment led to space for questions and connections, connecting my heart to reason. And I think Buddha was very influential because it was kind of a middle ground between Christianity and when I discovered Unitarian Universalism. And the teachings filled my heart, and the mindfulness really that I learned really restored my identity. My marriage created a shared identity, which strengthened my own identity and brought a cultural shift. My husband is Colombian, and there's nothing quite like a full Colombian family embrace. And then after my first child was born, he was very sick. And I think the fear of that loss gave me a better understanding of what life means. And then we had some unfortunate situations in Colombia with some guerrilla movements that created a lot of fear and death. And again, kind of deepened my understanding of what life means. And then after getting involved in Unitarian Universalism, I think the ministers that I were in contact with walked with me, kind of connecting dots and my search to beautiful moments of awe and a sense of finding home. I felt like I was really, truly at home in a faith for the first time in my life. And then my husband has a very severe, very rare autoimmune disease. And for the last 7 years, we've been dealing with that. And that He's the kind of person that wakes up every single morning glad to be alive.
Mm.
And sometimes it's a little too early for that, and I need my coffee. But then I can embrace that. And so that, again, has like just given me a whole different perspective of precious and the precious moments, and really paying attention to those moments. And I think the biggest thing was being a religious educator. My opportunity to be in shared ministry, shared moments of discovery with colleagues and the congregation, being a part of heartbreaks and healings, and learning and teaching how to live in this world has had the biggest influence on my journey. And that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. What a journey. What a journey, as are all of our journeys, filled with twists and turns and rapids and calm moments. So thank you for sharing. So we're going to move into our first activity today, which is talking about this whole idea of growing a UU identity. The growth of people's identity as Unitarian Universalists does not end when they walk through our doors. Some people say, oh, I finally made it, I'm home. But whether they're walking through the door the first time or the 100th time, we are all engaged in a process that continues throughout our life. Like a tree, our UU identity is always growing, branching out and putting down deeper roots. So our first slide describes saplings using this tree metaphor. A person who identifies their Unitarian Universalist faith in terms of what they don't believe rather than what they do believe is like a sapling. So this person might be a newer member of a congregation, or they could have been a member for many, many years. They may find it difficult to describe themselves as a religious person if they need theological language to do that. So they may have some history with religious language that really is a barrier to them really sort of articulating what their faith is and how their identity is forming in the UU faith. A person who's able to define their belief in more positive terms might be likened to a growing tree. The length of time in the congregation is not a reliable indicator of this or any stage. And we all know that person who, well, I've been here for 20 years. I've been here for 50 years. People may have a fully or a really well-formed sense of identity who've only been Unitarian Universalists for a relatively short period of time. They might be serving on committees, teaching in the RE program, and actively supporting the church, maybe stepping up into leadership. So, old growth. I don't know if I want to be old growth, but that's the term. A person who's accepting of all these stages of growth that we're talking about, who understands that the boundaries of each of the stages are contained within the other, sort of, the metaphor of concentric rings in a tree. So that person might be described as an old growth tree. They come to church regularly, they give generously, they support the RE program and lots of other congregational activities. They're there for the duration, and they have weathered many storms. They understand that Unitarian Universalism is much more than what they personally experience. So there's this sense of belonging, there's hopefully a sense of stewardship. And when I say stewardship, I don't mean only money, I mean stewardship in the sense of growing the faith and caring for those in our community. So I'm going to take you now through a short little meditation, a short little guided meditation. Using this tree metaphor, I want you to reflect on where you might be in your process of deepening your identity as a Unitarian Universalist. I invite you to get comfortable in whatever way you are able. If you want to turn off your video camera and, stretch out, lay on the floor, if you can still hear me, please make yourself comfortable. See in your mind's eye a tree that is who you are as a religious person, as a Unitarian Universalist, or however you identify. Look at the tree from a distance, from far enough away that you can see the whole tree, from top to bottom, alone or surrounded by other trees. Where is it? Is it in a field, a forest, a park? Are there other plants or other buildings around it? As you notice these things about this tree, begin to walk towards it, noticing as you do the shape and size of this tree. Is it large? Is it small? Is it young or old? Are the branches and limbs straight or gnarled? Look at it carefully and notice whatever you see. When you come quite close to the tree, notice the bark on its trunk. Imagine that you're running your hand along the bark. Is it smooth? Is it rough? How tough? How tender? And now imagine that you enter into the tree, that you become the tree, stretching yourself downward, feeling your roots going into the ground. What are those roots like? Is there one long taproot? Or do the roots divide? How deep do they go? Let your mind travel down through the roots, noticing what the ground is like as you push your way through it. Noticing what obstacles are in your way and how you have grown around them or turned aside. Feel how your roots are drawing up moisture and nutrients from the soil and carrying them upward to nourish the tree. Then, when you're ready, let yourself move upward into the rest of the tree. Explore it the same way, noticing, observing, feeling the trunk, the branches, the leaves, do they bear fruit or flowers? Are there birds or animals in the branches? And now, as you are ready, gently begin to withdraw yourself from the tree. Until you are once more seeing it from outside. And then gently return to this body, to your chair, to this group. So, as you are ready, and let's sort of remain in this quiet place together. Take out that paper and pen or pencil or markers and draw that tree that you just envisioned. Draw that tree that you became in your mind's eye. And this tree, we're not going to, there's no artistic awards for this tree. This is just a way for you to try to capture creatively some of the feelings, some of the things that came up for you during the exercise. And you may learn more about your tree as you sketch it out. And if you find yourself drawing details that you didn't imagine, that's okay. Your tree is growing. So I'm going to give you about 8 minutes for this, and I will ring a chime to bring us back. So I have put up a couple discussion questions, and we're going to be breaking into some smaller groups, and you'll have about 8 minutes to address these questions, 8 or 9 minutes. So think, if you will, how does your drawing reflect where you are now in this process of growing? And did you learn anything new about yourself?
And if you would like a copy of the questions in your small group, I've posted a link in the chat box there, so you can have a copy of those while you're out in the breakout rooms.
Thank you. Excellent. All right.
Oops, I think I posted the wrong one. Here's the right link. Sorry, guys.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to open the rooms. There's one observer in each room, and Anna is in a room, and I will join a room. So we will see you in 8 minutes.
Because it's expensive and far, and I have a bunch of small children I can't leave. But
yeah, that sounds like a lot of work.
I almost never left. Once every 5 years or so, I might get the chance to visit my mom. I did actually get to go to GA last year because, like,
nice.
magic happened where I was pregnant with my fifth, and my fourth was just old enough that I could leave him with dad for just a couple of days. And so, like, but that was like all the stars had to align, and it was like I leave, I get there, I start GA, and back on the plane, come home.
Wow.
So yeah, no, hardly ever. Someday, I'll see more states than Washington and California.
Washington's lovely, though.
I don't actually get to see Roz. We even were at GA together, and I never saw her in person, only on Zoom. Because although Anchorage is 6 hours away, which isn't really that bad in Alaska time.
Right.
When I was younger, that would be a day trip. But I hate Anchorage.
Yeah.
We're back. We're back, folks. And Andrea's back. Yay!
We'll try.
Andrea has been had a little trouble staying connected here. So, so now we're just gonna sort of close out this activity, just thinking about our congregations. So these questions are kind of for you to just sort of meditate on a little bit, but also, you know, if a couple people have some thoughts they want to share, we probably have enough time to share a couple of thoughts. So let's think really about the second question. What are some of the gifts of each one of these stages? The saplings, the growing trees, the old growth. Where the challenges or dangers? Anybody want to share on that question?
This is Teresa.
So recently, my husband found a new spiritual path, and he noticed something in his newfound little community about saplings that I'd known for a long time, but he's new to, which is that often saplings get evangelical about their newfound faith, and then it becomes all black and white. And this is how, even with they make up rules, and this is how you do it. If you don't do it, well, you need to be taught. But of course, they're teaching from nothing. And so he's just discovered this, and I'm like, no, everybody does it. It doesn't matter whether it's Christian or you or Hinduism. You go at it and you just jump right off the boat, and then you gotta swim back to the boat and dry yourself off for a while.
Teresa, you had your hand up there.
Thanks. Yeah. I'll say about old growth, which, we've got some people in our congregation who've been in it for a really long time and have given a lot. And I would say there can be some similar dangers with, like, thinking that the way they've always done it is the only way to do it, and not acknowledging some of the wisdom of newer perspectives.
Yeah, great. Gianna.
My comment was along similar lines, that when you're a sapling and you're brand new to something, you can get very dogmatic about it, but saplings also tend to bend and sway in the wind, and it's much easier for them to change their direction. And when you've been in something for a very long time, you can become very set, and it's difficult to change and snap instead of moving with the change, which is important. So that would be one of my dangers.
Yeah. Great. Well, Anna, I think we're a few minutes behind. Shall we let Katie have the last word, and then we'll move on?
Sure.
All right. Katie, go ahead.
I was just thinking about with growing trees, how, and maybe it's even somewhere in between saplings and growing trees, I'm not sure, that there's an exciting new energy, that they bring new ideas. And like, I'm thinking of one particular person here who's kind of jumped right in and started a coloring class for adults and clothing swap, and just, so there's excitement to the growing and the saplingness.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Thank you all. I love that tree metaphor, and I appreciate that y'all went with it.
Okay. All right. So we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about learning types and their needs. As we talked about yesterday, and as you read in your reader, age does not necessarily equal old growth. So think about the youth in your congregation. Where might you place some of them? Are they saplings? Are they growing? Or are some of them possibly even old growths in your congregations? And I'm sure that you can think of some older people in your congregations who are saplings or barely growing. So it's not necessarily a linear age developmental cycle there. All right. So in the reader, Dan's Harper essay pointed out several learning types and their needs. And on the next slide is a little bit of a summary of the information from the reader. So he places it as young children, older children, and then he has kind of youth and adults broken out into new, long-term, and deep. So young children are the ones in our congregations who have to learn how to do religion. So how to sit through a service, how to light a chalice, how to share joys and concerns, those things that are ritualized within our faith communities. So they're just learning how to go through those, just how to go through those steps and how to be in community that way. Older children start to discern who they are as religious individuals. So, learning about our heritage, about Unitarian Universalism, or about other world religions, and integrating all of that information into who are they, what do they believe, and then when you get into the youth age, Dan Harper has broken this out into the new, long-term, and deep. So you might have some new youth who come, to youth groups with friends of theirs, and they're just brand new to Unitarian Universalism. They're going to have to go through the same steps of figuring out, okay, what is this thing of lighting the chalice, and how do I sit through this boring service and keep my mind occupied? So they're learning how to do the religion, as well as learning a little bit about our faith, tradition, and heritage. Long-term youth who have been there know what to do. They're kind of feel like church is their home. They're comfortable there. They know how to do all of the things. They know about Unitarian Universalism. But they're starting to wonder about who they are as religious persons out in the wider world, as well as who they are within the faith community. Where do they fit? How can they contribute? As well as do they claim themselves as Unitarian Universalists out in the wider world? Or do they just tout that they believe what they want to believe, or things like that? So, and then deeper youth are embedded within their congregational lives or within the community of Unitarian Universalists, and they're ready to do a little bit more deeper reflection into theological questions and looking at how do they live those values in their lives. And similarly, there's new long-term and deep adults. New adults come in 3 different types. Come-outers are people who have come out of other religions. Come-inners are people who may not have had a religious background or were unchurched. Pass-throughers are people who come to our congregation for a time and decide that either Unitarian Universalism isn't for them, or they don't find a way that they can grow and fit within the community or within the faith. So you just kind of go on and find something else that fits for them. And similar to the youth, long-term and deep adults. So Dan Harper concludes in his essay that the developmental stage of the individual and socialization of the individual in the religious community do not necessarily have a strong correlation. For a given individual, the developmental stage may or may not predict relationship to and embeddedness within a given religious community. Within the context of a living religious community, developmental stage alone is an insufficient description of a learner. So I find that a lot of people really appreciate the X and Y axis thing that he talks about within his essay. So we're going to do one more breakout room and do some discussion around this. How can you foster religious identity growth in youth when some of the members of your congregation's youth group might be considered new, long-term, and deep? So when you've got a mixed bag of people who are able to engage at different levels and are at different levels within their own individual religious growth, how do you foster that religious growth within one group, specifically within a youth group? And then what possibilities for identity development exist for long-term adults and deep adults when so many of the adults in our congregation are new adults? Okay, and I think the link that I pasted first is the right one for this one. So if you want to pull up those questions while you're in your breakout rooms, do that.
Okay.
And then, so we have, let's see, about 10 minutes. 10 minutes to discuss within your groups. Actually, let's shave that down to 8 and come back around 2:10.
Sounds good. All right. Am I doing the breakout rooms?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I
How
don't
many
have the
do you
control.
want? 2 or 3? We can go right back into the same rooms that we were in. All right.
I left my group too early.
Uh-oh. Well, we're all coming now, so.
Okay, are we all back?
We're back.
Okay. So it is now break time. So we'll break for 5 minutes.
Mhm.
Come back at 2:16.
Great. Thank you. folks should be starting to come back. I actually have 2:17, so we're a little bit behind here. So what a compelling question. Is there one Unitarian Universalist identity? Provocative. We're not going to go there right now, but we are going to talk a little bit about, some of the qualities, characteristics of a Unitarian Universalist. So we're still waiting for a couple of folks. Katie's not back yet. We're going to go ahead and maybe Katie can hear us, but I kind of need people to be on screen because I'm actually going to be asking you to raise your hands and raise your hands, thumbs up, or whatever way you can to let me know you agree with some statements. So I'm going to read aloud some statements, and you all will get the hang of it very quickly. And as I read them, kind of look at the Brady Bunch screen and see, where people are. So if you're a religious professional, raise your hand or thumbs up or whatever. Are you a religious educator? Is there anybody here who's a minister? We have no ministers in this group. How about a lay leader? Would anybody call themselves a lay leader? Do you belong to a church? Do you belong to a congregation? Do you belong to a fellowship? Do you work with a minister? Do you work with an administrator? Are you from the Central East region? My home region? Anybody from the Central East? No? How about the Southern region? Yay! How about Mid-America? Mid-America. How about Pacific or Western region? Western region. All right. How about New England? Yay!
And Canada.
And Canada. Yay! Thank you. You've been in your role for 5 years or longer. You've been, this is only your first year serving a congregation.
Is that any congregation or the one you're currently in?
This congregation, the current congregation you're in. Do you work full time? How about half time? How about quarter time? You were raised as a Unitarian Universalist. Really? Am I the only one? I'm stunned. You claim a Unitarian Universalist identity. So you can see, many of us claim a UU identity, but underlying that identity, we're very, very different. We're working different kinds of positions. We are in congregations that name themselves differently. We have probably got as many different theological beliefs as there are people. So there's a lot of diversity. Some of us work with other staff. Some of us are working, kind of in isolation. So there's really no one way to do the work that we do, to be a religious professional. There's no one way to serve a congregation. And there's no one way to be a Unitarian Universalist. So what I'd like you to do now actually is open up the chat box. We're going to do just a quick brainstorm. And what I'd like you to do is think about some of the characteristics or the core traits that someone might have if they were calling themselves Unitarian Universalist. There's no right and wrong. We're just going to do it. We're just going to do a brainstorm. So we're going to take 2 minutes and write in the chat box, and let's see what we come up with. Can everybody access the chat box? Open mind, open to religious exploration, commitment to social and racial justice, open heart, believe and attempt to live the 7 principles. Great. Committed to exploration, open to learning about the sources, always love to bring the sources in, questioning, community is important. They wish to be active. So active participants in the community, or maybe active participants in their own faith development. They live out their faith. Any others that come to mind? I don't know, do you have to like coffee? Tea, we have tea drinkers, yay. You should like coffee. I like to think that maybe there's a commitment to RE and the next generation. Go write that down. Potlucks, yay, good one. Healthy foods. Pro-environment, so there's that commitment to the interdependent web. Yeah. Environmental justice, so a commitment or awareness or a willingness and openness to environmental justice. A sense of personal responsibility. Yeah. Good. Allies for LGBTQ community, allies to hopefully to some of our folks maybe in the Black Lives Matter movement or in other kinds of racial justice communities. Willing to partner with other folks in other theological places for the common work. Good. So so now we can add more to this, but I'm just wondering, what for you? Commitment to being welcoming. Good. Thank you. Keep thinking of them. Is there anything that, and we're just going to have a brief open conversation, maybe for the next 4 minutes, then we're going to move into our next activity. But is there anything that really feels elemental to you, or just really a core quality of a UU identity, either something we've already named or something that we haven't yet named? And just, feel free to just popcorn, speak out.
A wish to be inclusive isn't always acted on, but
intention. So intention around being inclusive community. I love that. Gianna says a free and responsible search for the truth. Rebecca says open hearts and minds. for me, compassion and justice in hand have always felt to me like a really essential part of my UU identity, that you can love, but if you can't love if there aren't the acts of justice to go along with it, to complement. Other thoughts? Working toward the positive, Alicia says. And individual responsibility and systemic change. Yeah, holding those two tensions. Good. Great. We're going to have to make you do jumping jacks. Everybody's quiet. A sanctuary of healing. Oh, thank you, Jules. That's beautiful. That's wonderful. Okay. Well, I encourage you to continue to think about, sort of what are the core qualities? What are the really essential bedrock pieces of a UU identity? And that might be something that you might, again, think about the saplings and the growth and the old growth, and maybe some of those UU identity traits, there are common threads across the different ages and stages, but there may be things that are really just discrete within a particular group. And we might want to, spend some time thinking about that. There's another one here, recognizing the link between being an individual and our connection to the interdependent web. Great. Yeah. So I think we'll move on from our little brainstorm. Anna, are you ready to take us into the next activity?
Yes. So now we're going to be talking about honoring both our Unitarian and Universalist roots of identity. And sometimes I like to switch this up and saying honoring both our Universalist and Unitarian identity, because sometimes Universalists are tired of being put second. So it's not intentional. All right, so you had a chance to read through the themes in North American Unitarian Universalist history in your reader, and to reflect on what inspired you and challenged you in the reflection on the forums. So it's important to remember and to pass on the heritage of both Unitarian and Universalist roots, so that I believe that we can have a firm grounding to know where we come from and get a larger scope and understanding in the sense of where we're going. If we don't know our history, we're bound to repeat it, kind of thing. So learning what we as Unitarian Universalists have done right, things that have moved us forward as a faith movement, as well as things that possibly that we did wrong, that we might want to learn from and take forward. So on the next slide, we've pulled out some of the themes from the reader. So let's share how we see these roots affecting our lived experiences of Unitarian Universalism today. So we can do this kind of just share out loud, or if you'd like to type in the chat, that's okay too. So looking at freedom of thought or non-creedalism, how our early Unitarian and Universalist idea is reflected in your UU congregation or community. I know in our congregation we have a Free Thinkers Forum, and that's very important for them to be able to have that forum in order to to really look at those hard questions of whether there's a God and that kind of stuff, and to be able to wrestle and grapple with that. So that's one example how I see it in my congregation or community. Does anybody else have some examples?
In our congregation, the power of nature is very important, and science. That's also, that seems to have taken the forefront. I'm not sure it necessarily should be so out there, because I think there is a portion of our congregation that is wishing for a little bit more mention of the word God, but the power of nature and the transcendentalists have had a heavy hand in our group.
Yeah, how do you see that showing up in concrete terms?
Well, our last minister definitely considered herself a scientist and a naturalist, and many of her sermons were based on those two topics.
And like Rebecca led the way, we don't have to just focus on this first one. Thank you, Rebecca. If you want to talk about ongoing revelation and how the different expressions of religion have shaped Unitarian Universalism, how do you see that in your community, as well as building a beloved community? How are ways that you see this showing up in your communities?
Just recently am I interrupting some?
Nope.
Go ahead.
We just recently started doing Family Fourth Fridays in our community, and not just folks from the UU are invited, kind of everyone and friends, and pulling in other folks, and everyone kind of gets an opportunity to host, and whomever is hosting gets to choose kind of what we're going to talk about, how we're going to deepen our faith together. A lot of it is related to parenting, because we get a lot of those folks who are looking to connect with other adults with young children. But it's really given us an opportunity to kind of honor that openness and see where everyone's coming from.
So you see that as an example of building that beloved community, opening it up not just to the congregation.
Yeah, hearing what other folks have to say and think, and obviously with politics being a big part of our national scheme right now, we've been able to talk about those things and in a very healthy way.
I was going to say that in terms of ongoing revelation, I think that our church is really, particularly this last year, has been really great about interfaith work. So we're strongly part of this interfaith justice organization, but we've also, like, we had a Sikh speaker came one Sunday, and so we did an intro class, like Sikhism 101, that a bunch of people came to learn about that ahead of time, and we did an Islam 101 class at a mosque and had like 60 people come, and then have been looking at different ways that we can use some of those expressions of religion respectfully in what we're doing as well.
Our congregation, we have a brand new minister that we've had for a little less than a year now, so that's new for us, but she still only preaches about half the time, and the rest of the time it's lay led. So, and I think that really helps, because depending on who's doing the service, flavors it. And sometimes it's really science-based, and sometimes it's nature-based. And like whenever they need a pagan sermon, they kind of ask me. And she brings a little bit of Christianity and Judaism to it, which is nice, because, I don't know about your guys's, but our adults tend to freak out when you start saying God or anything vaguely Christian. And so I think having that different flavors of people doing it really helps to balance it out. Sometimes it's more God focused, sometimes it's more justice focused, sometimes it's more environmental.
In our congregation, in terms of the power of nature, definitely a really big, for a long time they had a very strong green sanctuary committee. and a big focus on solar energy, trying to get that into the South Carolina area. And so while the group itself right now isn't really active, they were able to kind of institutionalize some things, like really being committed to recycling, of course, and, you know, at our events, not using paper products, you know, using dishes and, you know, washing them and that sort of thing. So that there's that. And then also having the area, it got a recognition as a South Carolina nature. They have a backyard program, thanks of the ground, because of the way it's planted, to attract pollinators and stuff. So definitely that. And then in terms of ongoing revelation, we just last year ended an 18-month cycle. Of the first Sunday of each month, the minister talked about a different religion and followed chronologically. So started way back with like earth-based and followed them as they emerged through history, and then ended with the current kind of more modern feminism aspect of divine goddess kind of stuff.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing. So as you can see, you know, these aren't just popping up in our congregations. You know, these are strong threads that have carried through history and have deep roots within our faith movement. So it's interesting to see how they, you know, they change and they morph a little bit, but you can still see some of that carrying through our history. Okay, so just quickly, I want to draw your attention to handout 11. You'll see some examples there of Tapestry of Faith programs that explore UU history. And if you haven't already looked at those might be some ways for you to look at how those threads have traversed our faith history with people in your congregation, maybe long-term or deeper youth or adults who may want to delve a little bit deeper and to learn about that. And it's not listed there, but and maybe it looks at it from a little bit of a different lens, but we used What Moves Us, which is also a Tapestry of Faith curricula. And I'd highly recommend that. That looks through Unitarian, both Unitarian and Universalist theology and how they've changed over time. So not necessarily history in the sense of history of our movement, but definitely some of the big theological pushes that have brought us to where we are today. So those are some great resources for you to take a look at. So we are going to look at how you can put your knowledge of Unitarian Universalist history to use in your work as religious educators. So here is one scenario. Some parents are upset, oops, there we go. Some parents are upset that the 4th grade curriculum for this year is about the life and teaching of Jesus. They complain, I don't bring my child to a UU church to learn about Christianity. I come here because it's not Christian. So with this, I wonder if any of you have had this happen in your congregations. These are real life scenarios, things that have happened. What was that?
I'll wait until you're finished. Sorry.
Oh, okay, that's okay. Okay. So so we have some questions, and Pat, if you can advance, here we go. How would you handle this scenario if it happened in your particular UU context?
Can I? Okay. Sorry, I jumped on that. So that happens a lot with I've worked in 3 different UU congregations, and whenever there's conversation around Jesus, it can get a little bit uncomfortable. And one of the things that I think really opens people that I've found is a conversation around we live in a Christian culture, and that for children and even adults to be able to communicate and articulate their faith and understand what the people are what their friends and their friends' families or colleagues are talking about, that is really important to have a basis in Christian knowledge and Jesus.
Thank you, Jules.
I take the same approach. So this is the first year we're going to start a Jesus curriculum, and we're only going to do it through the birth of Christ at Christmas, and then we're going to switch over to UU identity, so as to not stretch my luck here. And we've never done one. I've been teaching there for 7 years, and we've never really touched on Jesus other than in passing, like, you know, a little at Christmas and maybe a little at Easter, but nothing really. And I warned everyone. I've been talking about it for 2 years now, that this was coming, and that the reason why is, you know, you ask our kids about Buddha, Muhammad, they could tell you some stuff, but I told the loaves and fishes story at a temporal ages. None of them had ever heard it. And so I also take the cultural method, and I've been prepping for 2 years. So at this point, everybody knows, and every new family, I like scope them out, be like, where are you coming from? Is this going to be a problem? And so that's, so far I haven't had to deal with that yet, but that is how I've been preemptively dealing with it.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. That really takes into account where they are emotionally, and that's really like some pastoral care to lay the foundation work for that to come into place. Wonderful. Is there maybe one other person who wants to share a different way you might handle this scenario, or from a different perspective?
Yeah, I've got one.
Yeah.
Particularly because I would not identify us as being part of a Christian culture. I mean, we are, but really we're much more secular. Mm-hmm. So I talk about it from that we want to approach anything from a UU lens. So what can we learn about any of the prophets or wise people or other world religions or science or humanism or whatever by looking at it through a UU lens? And I have found, I have also taken a long view. There's no way we would have done anything related to Bible stuff 5 years ago. And that's really shifted. And if I can take a second to finish the story that I started in my breakout section, because it was about this. A bunch of oldsters took a history course, a new UU class, intended for newcomers, and they really leapt on humanism as the one way to be UU, which was very unwelcoming for the three people who were new to our congregation and didn't necessarily share that perspective. And they really angrily questioned why children would be learning anything to do with the Bible, because, as one of them put it, they can go to that church across the river for that. And so, we just tried to talk openly about that we're not taking any of these lessons as, like, going back to Revelation not being sealed, that we are trying to learn from and apply to our lives whatever we can, regardless of the source.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I have one more note. So a few years ago, this came up in a homeschool group, because in a Waldorf curriculum, at certain points you talk about Jesus. And the way it was explained to me, which eased a lot of people, and I've used since, is that the parents probably, most likely, would not have issues if we were talking about Buddha. They would probably not have issues if we were talking about Zeus. They would probably not have issues if we were talking about Shiva. So think of it as, instead of this is the one true light and the way, it's just another mythos that we're covering.
Yeah, and one other thing that I want to lift up is that, a lot of people see UU as not Christian. But there are a lot of Christian UUs. And we also want to lift up the values of Christianity, which, sometimes we throw the baby out with the bathwater. People have had bad experiences and are tired of Judeo-Christian culture of North America, and they want to get away from it and experience and lift up other religions and wisdom and science, and that's all wonderful. But there are, I would like to say that there are some valuable insights and wonderful things that we can bring from our understanding of Christianity without necessarily tying ourselves to that theological understanding. So it's not a theological learning, but a wisdom learning. And I think, as Unitarian Universalists lift up, we have many sources of wisdom, and Christianity is one of them. So the next question here in our reflection, how is history shaping the person's UU identity? So this might be the parents' identity, UU identity, or you might want to take a look at their children's UU identity in this scenario. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
I was thinking this with the first question too, that I think I would want to, before I even launched into any of my explanations of why we were doing it, I would want to find out from them why, what about it makes them so uncomfortable, and kind of tease some of that, which I think is related into how is the history, because their history would most likely come out if I were to ask them, I'd be curious if you'd be willing to tell me a little bit more about your discomfort with that. I have my thoughts on why it's happening, but I'd like to understand where your perspective is coming from, so we can try to find some space in between here. Mm-hmm. And then that history can kind of inform me in terms of how I respond to them, because I know that I often tend to jump into this explanation, justifying explanation or something, and then they're like, well, no, that's not even my issue. My issue is this. And I've missed the boat altogether. So,
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so hearing where they're coming from and meeting them where they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would just say I think it's interesting because I think it also sometimes reflects the ignorance of many UUs of their own history, of their faith tradition.
Yeah.
Because it did come out of a Christian tradition. So, and we honor all the sources. So it is interesting that they're often so harmed by their experience with other faith traditions that then maybe haven't learned or forget, that the UU tradition doesn't exclude those.
Mm. Okay, and then our last one here, how might the age or stage of faith development of the person in this scenario impact how you respond? That kind of hits on what you were lifting up, Katie, and you, Teresa. Anybody else who hasn't had a chance to contribute to this discussion have any thoughts you want to share?
I guess I would say that, at the beginning, it's harder to be more open-minded. And so we have to take that into account and be really careful and purposeful about our discussion. If you just go back to the principles and you point out that we're supposed to be learning from all of these sources, and we're totally okay with everyone taking on what they want and not taking on other things, and just going very slowly, because I think at the beginning it's kind of overwhelming, because we're, on one hand, we don't want to be told what to do, and on the other hand, it's a lot easier to be told, this is it. And so we're in a tough position there.
Yeah. And I didn't notice this earlier, but Pat was pointing out with Christianity, openness as a core trait within Christianity. Yeah, wonderful. Anyone else? Any last thoughts on this scenario?
reminds me of when we were talking about the saplings, knowing quite a bit of what they don't believe in versus what they do. And I think such an aversion to a teaching like this out of the context of Christianity, I think that would kind of stop your growth for a little while if you weren't ready to hear all of those things.
Okay, thank you, Alicia. I'm going to post a link here. In the leader resources, we had some other scenarios that we could have used. We just went with this one because we thought that it might be something that you all have either encountered or may encounter in your work. But if you want to check out some of the other scenarios to see some ways that you might want to prepare yourself to respond to things that may come up in your work, check that out through that link. And if we can, we'll try to post that in the group too, if it's easier for people to get to that way.
You could even use it as an exercise for like an RE committee meeting.
Yes.
You know, if you're having some challenges in a particular group, to maybe, you know, do some reflection around that scenario.
Okay. All right, Pat.
All right. So we're going to move into our closing here. I just want to check. There's a new message. Okay, the scenario is in the chat box. So these are the reflection questions for your work on in the forum. Despite our different theological beliefs, how is a distinct Unitarian Universalist identity formed? Which I think is a great question, and it's one that I think a lot of people wrestle with, is how can we be one body, one beloved community, when sometimes our beliefs and our understandings are so different and so diverse? How does the multiplicity of Unitarian Universalist identities affect identity formation of our youth and young adults? Another good question. So this is the forum. Just showing you again the question 1 and question 2. And if you didn't already respond to the themes in UU history, that there's a forum thread for that as well. So that would be the work to complete session 2. Tomorrow, we will be moving on to session 3, and there is some reading in the reader about free and responsible search, and we're going to invite you tomorrow to create a 6-word story of faith. Has anybody ever done a 6-word story? That's kind of one of these little things that's been out there, and people have done it in a variety of settings. Six-word story of, you know, autobiography. And they're kind of fun, but yet 6 words is challenging. So we'll invite you to do that, I guess, tomorrow. So be thinking about what your 6 words might be. Handouts 13 through 16 will be the relevant handouts. We are going to, it says pre-work link to the 6 words stories of faith, and we'll see if we can get that link in there. So I think that covers the work for this evening, this afternoon. We have some closing words. I've done an awful lot of talking. Is there anybody who would like to just take us out with these closing words? Somebody who'd like to read for us? Do I have to call on you? Who would like to read our closing words? Andrea?
I can do it.
Thank you.
Yep. Our Unitarian Universalist heritage bids us light our chalice, bids us to light our chalice in the name of freedom and the light of reason, in actions of tolerance. We gather in community to celebrate a heritage of freedom, reason, and tolerance. Our Unitarian Universalist heritage bids us light our chalice in the name of faith, in the light of hope, in actions of love. We gather in community to celebrate a heritage of faith, hope, and love. Let us bring this Unitarian Universalist heritage into our world and our lives today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you all for a really wonderful session. Really enjoyed our conversations today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will see you 1 o'clock, and we will see you on the forum.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.